And when I say it rains, it pours, I mean like I can't afford a new tire. I couldn't afford the time to switch the tire, but I had to do it anyways. So I'm trying to utilize my time these days to devote to important things because when it rains, it pours. And so it started raining for me back in 2020 when I realized that something terribly wrong was taking place. And you'll remember it was COVID, whatever. The super deadly pandemic that apparently killed millions of people and nothing bad has happened since. And why are the people that did all that stuff still in charge of the world? It's difficult to make sense of. But I do want to point out something else that I'm noticing happening right now because I was way ahead of the curve back then. And I have a bad feeling I'm way ahead of the curve now. So I want to talk to you about raining and pouring in the context of Israel, not the United States, and Judeo-Christian values. Okay. So right now there are a lot of people out there, your Ben Shapiro's and your Mark Levins, duking it out with people like Tucker Carlson. And for those of you that are like political junkies like me, this is about something more than just simple politics. It's the idea that this is about politics went out the window a few months ago. So basically, now we're trying to describe the state of the world and who has the authority to tell other people what is the right set of values to hold. And so there's a lot of people right now that tend to lean towards the protection of Israel first and foremost, even over the United States. And those people are constantly and routinely defending this concept of Judeo-Christian politics. I'm writing a Substack about it right now because it's a very complicated issue, but very complicated subject. But just the other day, I'll give you a part of what it is I'm going over. Just the other day, this what's his name? Bill O'Reilly was on Piers Morgan program, and they were talking about Nick Fuentes and why is Tucker Carlson platforming Fuentes, and we need to have a little more decorum on the conservative side, and we're the ones that really know what's good and what's true and what's valuable. And I just wrote a book about this. Is Bill O'Reilly? I'm channeling. You better not lose the connection. It says it's unstable. I'm writing a book called Evil or something. You look at the book Evil that he's writing. This book about evil and how like the United States stands in the face of these evil moral systems, and it's got it's got Mao, it's got Mao, it's got Hitler, and then it's got Putin. And I'm just thinking, Putin. What does Putin have to do with it? So, well, see, Putin apparently is the mortal enemy of the West in this uh, boomer kind of mentality, understanding of the world and where our values come from, which is also intimately intertwined with Judeo-Christian. But I don't think they've ever really taken the time to tease that apart. And what are we saying when we say Judeo-Christian? And why is Russia our enemy? Because I will say that I started noticing this stuff. This whole, remember when Trump first got elected in 2016, and everybody was going Russia, Russia, Russia. I remember RussiaGate, and Russia had the P tape and like all this crazy shit. And I remember going to the gym, and there were older gentlemen there, boomers, and they would all be like, "Oh, Trump colluded with Russia, and they've got him, and it's just a matter of time before Mueller takes Trump out because he has." And I was just like, "Wait, why are we enemies with Russia all of a sudden?" I said I didn't understand why we were enemy. Why did we go back to hating Russia? I don't know if you remember, but Secretary Clinton, the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she was the Secretary of State, did this whole thing with Lavrov, who was the secretary for Russia, where they were hitting the red button, the reset button on Russia-American relations. And somehow, over the fight that erupted in the Donbass and Lugansk area of Ukraine, where there was Russian speakers and traditionally Russian people living there started this big conflict there, right? So, and that was, the little green men that voted in Crimea. If you're familiar with all this stuff, I mean, this is just geopolitics of the European scenario over there. And it never made any sense. And I admittedly, I was watching a lot of Russia Today and I was listening to Vladimir Putin speak. And I'm like, man, this guy really shares a lot of the same values that I think people on this side of the pond really believe in. So why are we fighting over this? And by the way, Russia hasn't been a communist state or a communist zone since like the 80s. So I was like, what's going on here? Why is everybody so pissed at Russia? What's the deal with Russia? Why Russia, Russia, Russia? And then I started to kind of like realize only recently, by the way, that, see, Russia is the Eastern Orthodox branch of Christianity. And the Ukraine is also Eastern Orthodox. This is largely speaking, but so you'll find that the largest population centers for Eastern Orthodox Christians are number 1, Russia, number 2, Ethiopia, and number 3, Ukraine. But I was like, man, why is Bill O'Reilly going after Putin? Why is Putin the singularly evil guy? And then I realized, because he's a Christian. Because, you see, he's an actual Christian. He's not a Judeo-Christian. He's a Christian. He's just like a Christian. So like this is Christians that didn't go through like the Reformation like it did in Britain and England. I'm going way too far on this stuff, but the point is that the eastern side of the church needs to get back together with the western side of the church. But see, there's a problem there. There's a problem with the east and the west recombining. You see, because the west kind of like had this marriage with the king or the Caesars of Rome, of the Roman Empire. So Christianity, it became something out of the Israeli Judaism roots in Israel, and it grew and basically like took over the place of Judaism in that part of the world, and it actually eventually toppled the Roman Empire and became part of the Roman Empire. And then that part of the Roman Empire moved its way out to where the Vatican now sits, and the Vatican became like the new kind of like home of the western side of Catholicism, Christianity. And then they had this split with the Eastern Orthodox Church, where basically they had like this whole thing where it was more of like a college of equals. There was no pope. There was no singular guy that gave authority to the church. Whereas in the West, there was a singular pope that was kind of like God's actor on earth. And he's infallible. There's a lot of like really simple things that they kind of debate over, but they're really not that. They have the same value set, right? Besides the schism, which happened in like 1000, I don't know, I can't remember the exact year, but there was like the Crusades. I've written about this too, where the West, Rome, sent troops to go defend the East, Byzantine or Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire. And they went there and they basically saved their butts, but then they got tired of saving their butts and they kind of like sacked it. And like there's all this infighting, and there's always been this infighting in Christianity. But there was always infighting in Christianity because there was always infighting when you're trying to decide what is the truth, what is the right thing to do, and you're constantly like wrestling with this idea of God. What does my God want of me? There's lots of people that have lots of different opinions, and so the church kind of like broke itself into like 1,000 different pieces. You have to wonder how it remained united, at least in its value set, if it's been broken into 1,000 different little pieces. But you don't wonder that so much with Judaism. Judaism is kind of like, no, the majority, and don't get me wrong, there are lots of Jews that are against the nation state of Israel. Your Noam Chomsky's and your Norman Finkelstein's, and so like some of the most powerful voices against Israel are actually Jewish people. So don't get it twisted what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot of infighting. Okay, there's a lot of infighting when people aren't sure who the father is. And I was thinking about Hamlet. Have you ever seen Hamlet? Hamlet is this wonderful play by William Shakespeare, but there's this scene called The Scene Within a Scene. And see, what it is that Hamlet, his father, who was the king, sorry, I'm getting hot. His father, who was the king, was murdered by his mother and I think his uncle. And she's like, just before he gets murdered, she puts on this whole scene where she's like, I could never be with anyone else besides you. You're the only one I love. And like, it's these kind of sentiments, like, oh, I just love you so much. Meanwhile, she's like fooling around with the brother and they plot to kill the king. And they sneak into his bedroom at night and they poison him. Or the brother does. And then shortly after, the brother marries Hamlet's mom, and then he becomes the new king. And what Hamlet does is he's real sus of these two. He says something doesn't smell right, and what he does is he sets up a play. He sets up a play and he writes it. And what he does is he does a microcosm of the macrocosm of the situation, right? So he suspects he knows what happened, and he has the queen sit there with the king and watch the play, and he's sitting there the whole time like, he's like, what do you guys think about this play, right? Isn't this a fascinating play? And his mom like, he's like, mother, what do you think of the play? Because the scene had just come up where the mother was like, oh, king, I could never live without you. You're the only king for me. I would probably die if you weren't here in my life, and so on and so forth, just like the actual mother had done to the actual king just before he got murdered by his brother. And this part happens, and Hamlet's like, what do you think, mother? What do you think about that scene? And she's like, the lady doth protest too much, methinks, right? Because she's like, oh, I'm not going to tell him that I killed his dad. That would be bad. And he's definitely not very happy with me. And he'll probably do something rash, And do you all see what I'm going to? So then what happens is the king starts to see the thing, and Hamlet's like, the king's like, whoa, what is this that I'm watching here? And Hamlet's like, oh, it's nothing. We're fooling around. He goes, you're a free man, aren't you, uncle? You don't have like anything tormenting your soul, do you? You don't actually you have no guilt to be concerned with. So we're all just kind of like watching what would happen if something like this were to happen. And these people have nothing to do with you. But the uncle gets just like freaked out. He's just like, he's like, this guy's tormenting me. And he freaks out and he runs outside to get to the light just for air or whatever. And, he's like scurrying. He's pretending, I don't know what's going on. And I was thinking about if you could think in terms of what Rome was and what the kind of like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the existing power structure, how you could think about that dynamic. I'm watching the show with my kids, The Chosen, and I know that it's made for dramatic effect or whatever, just like Macbeth made this microcosm of the macrocosm for dramatic effect, just to see how it affect people. And in the show, the Pharisees see this crazy guy called John the Baptist is running around, and he calls the Pharisees a pit of vipers. And the one of them, see, not all the Pharisees are bad. Like there's this guy who's named Nicodemus. He's the teacher of teachers, and he's very wise, and he's part of the existing orthodoxy. And like these were like deep thinkers. They would debate back and forth, like all the time, just debate back and forth. What's right? What's wrong? How do we interpret the scriptures? And then he has this guy, Shmuel, I think is his name, and Shmuel sees this guy John the Baptist call the Pharisees a pit of vipers, and he goes, he turns them in to the Romans, and the Romans see all the Pharisees and the Jewish people that lived in that time in Israel. They were still under King Herod, and they were still under the Jewish authorities, and they still had to obey Jewish laws and things like that. But see, the Romans controlled the area. Okay? The Romans were the kings. The Romans were the kings, and the Romans were the ones that basically they were tax farming everybody. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were kind of like, let's be honest, they were kind of like the queens, okay? But the queens, see, the queens were not happy when they saw this this guy saying bad stuff about them. And then when Jesus came along, they were really not happy. They were like, who is this guy? He's trying to ruin our thing. And he's turning over the tables and he's telling people that they don't have to make sacrifices to us and that they should listen to him and they should act the way that he thinks that we should act. Who is this guy? We got to do something about this. And then they basically, the story in the Bible, in the New Testament, is that they plotted to have Jesus taken by the Roman authorities, and then he's crucified, buried, dies buried, and then rises again 3 days later. And see, modern Judaism doesn't buy that. Now, I'm not saying modern Jews, because if I was saying that, I'd be like a racist and an idiot. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just pointing out that that is the story of the New Testament. I mean, like, that's the story of the New Testament. If you only go by the Old Testament, then you want to interpret things through your set of rules. Only my set of rules makes sense. You need to listen to my set of rules. And if you're not listening to my set of rules, then you're a bad person. Well, see, that's the Judeo and Judeo-Christian. And that's always been an oxymoron, because the Judeo is all about what Judaism thinks first. You interpret it through what Judaism thinks first. And then Christianity is like, and also, I guess that guy that, that king, he died. He died. Somebody poisoned him asleep. We don't know who it was, but he died. And with this new king, obviously Rome, new king is who you need to listen to. We got all of our values and our ethics and our principles from the new king, from the Judeo-Christian. It was the marriage of the uncle and the queen. And Macbeth, not Macbeth, but Hamlet, he suspects something, and he says, I know you guys are up to something, and you both know what you did. Are you not free men? Why are you acting like you have a guilty conscience? And see, I don't think people get that that's what's happening. So I'll bring it back now to Bill O'Reilly and to Piers Morgan, who are both talking about their guilty consciences over World War II. And the fact that, by the way, you guys teamed up with the USSR, who you now hate so much, but they actually share the same values as you. Whereas, not when it was communist, obviously, but see, they have the Eastern Orthodox Church. Why can not the Western value set recognize that the Eastern value set is actually kind of like the same? They're the same values. They want the same things for their people. They want their people to have rights. They want their people to be able to go to church. They want their people to be able to engage in the market system. They want all of this stuff, and they want an end to the military-industrial complex, and they want an end to NATO, and they want an end to the endless wars, and they want to have peace. They want a peace deal. But we can't have a peace deal with those guys. Those guys are bad, and they're trying to kill us all, and they must be bad. And look at Bill O'Reilly, put them on the cover of his book. Bill O'Reilly is on Piers Morgan, and Bill O'Reilly is saying, oh, that's Nick Fuentes guy. He doesn't know anything. And the kids that listen to him, they don't know anything. And meanwhile, I'm listening to Nick Fuentes wax poetically about the idea of dispensationalism and Zionism and kind of like the marriage of the two. And it's not necessarily hashtag not all, but there's a lot of people that have a lot of very cozy relationships with the military industrial complex, with Christian Zionism, with Israeli Zionism. And you have to understand that this is not like they are all this or they are all that, but a lot of the people right now who are espousing, no, it's Judeo-Christian, are the ones that are literally saying, no, they are all this or they are all that. And the funny part about, if you know that there's this guy, Josh Hammer, that debated Dave Smith, Josh Hammer was the one trying to tell everybody, we know this because Judeo-Christian, we share the same, we hate Russia and we hate the Muslims. And whatever. I'm not saying that the Muslims share the exact same unique set of principles and values as Christians, but Orthodox Islam and Orthodox Christianity probably agree on a lot more than unorthodox secularism and militarism and transgenderism and all these other isms that are basically escaping the watchful eye of Hamlet, who's saying to you guys, he's playing the play within the play right now, and y'all are freaking out. And some of us are like sitting back, the part about when he does that, there's all the other nobles in the audience, and they're all like, what is going on here? What's wrong with that guy? He's freaking out. What's wrong with the king? Like the queen keeps it together because she's like sneaky, right? She's just like, I don't know what's going on here. That guy seems like he's really weird. And that queen, she's really protesting too much. I don't know why she's doing that. It makes her look guilty. And she knows the story, right? She knows the story. She just doesn't want to admit it. But the king freaks out. The king freaks out because he killed the king. The king killed the king, and now the son knows that the king killed the king. But you can only, I mean, that's almost like two different players, right? How can the king be both the king and the son? You feel me? So Bill O'Reilly, he writes this book co-written by a guy named Josh Hammer, the guy that debated Dave Smith at Turning Point USA shortly before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So, we're just talking in terms of ideas, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but sometimes the lady doth protest too much, methinks. And there's a lot of that happening right now on X. I mean, it's like there's just people flipping out. You gotta ask yourself, what is their problem? If you're just in the audience and you don't know anything about the backstory, if you don't know what Hamlet knows, you're probably watching it and you're going, these people seem a little unhinged. There's something. What are we missing here? Are we missing something? And I think a lot of people don't know that there's this story within the story, a microcosm of the macrocosm, and how that affects human psychology. And when people are just so sure that you need to accept this thing that we say, because otherwise, if you're a Nazi, and like everybody's watching Tucker Carlson point out how absurd it all is, and they're losing the crowd. And I want to tell you this because Nick Fuentes, for all of his faults, is not a Nazi. And in fact, what he says, and this is what Bill O'Reilly and Piers Morgan comment on, is this clip. Nick Fuentes says, you guys need to watch it when you call me a Nazi, because if I'm a Nazi, then there's millions of Nazis running around. And what he's really saying is, listen, I'm not a Nazi. I'm just a Christian, and I think he's Catholic, but he's just saying I'm an American. I'm an American, and you're calling Americans Nazis, and you need America to believe that you didn't kill the king in collaboration with the king, because Hamlet's breathing down your neck. Okay, hey guys, you know where you're at? You're at the middle rows. We're like right there. We're like between the metaphysical and the material, and there's a lot of things happening out there, but you are an individual soul having an experience made imago Dei in the image of God. And if you want to know where your principles, values, rights, ethics all come from, they come from the example not of Judaism. Unfortunately, they come from Jesus Christ, the Son, the Father, God. How could it all be working out exactly this way when those who want you to believe that no, they are right, they're the ones, trust me, they're all losing it. They're not trustworthy, and they're not like the Jews. It's the military-industrial complex, and they try, for all his faults, they tried to get Trump to denounce Tucker, and he said no. And they tried to get JD Vance to denounce Tucker and Fuentes, and he said, no, we want to protect Israel because that's where the Holy Sepulchre is, which is where Jesus died. And that's what our priorities are. That's why we want to keep Israel safe and free from people that might want to trash it, because we have our own set of values that come from there, but they're not strictly there. Like this idea of these people that want you to believe that no, our values come from Israel. Yes, they do, but they come from a specific person in Israel. That person is Jesus Christ. Or Hamlet, or whatever. I mean, it's a spirit. Call it whatever you want, but we can see which lady doth protest too much, and we can see that the king, the one who thinks he was the king, the boomers and the Piers Morgans and the and the Bill O'Reillys, y'all missed the play. So maybe you should go watch it again, because you guys sound like the uncle. We're not Romans. We're Christians. God bless you guys. Jesus walks.